She thought the old beggar sitting outside their gate every morning was just another homeless man asking for spare change. So every day, she secretly gave him $10 from her lunch money, $10 that would cost her everything. Her stepmother caught her one morning, and the beating was so brutal, neighbors had to pull her off. "You're giving my money to street trash?" Her stepmother screamed, throwing her against the wall. But what her stepmother didn't know was that this beggar owned half the buildings in Lagos. He wasn't homeless, he was testing people. And for 3 months, she was the only person in that entire neighborhood who looked him in the eye and treated him like a human being. The wall scraped Zainab's spine as she slid down it, the rough cement peeling skin from her back the way Halima had peeled dignity from her earlier that morning. She did not cry when she hit the floor. Crying required the belief that someone might care enough to stop. Instead, she pressed her forehead to her knees and focused on breathing through the ache spreading across her ribs, each inhale dragging pain through her chest like punishment for staying alive. The house was quiet in the way only cruel houses ever were satisfied. Smug, settled back into itself after doing what it was built to do. From the main room came the sound of Halima moving about, clanging pots louder than necessary, humming under her breath with the same tuneless confidence she always wore after violence. That was one of the things Zainab hated most. Halima did not rage blindly. She enjoyed herself. The beating had not been a loss of control. It had been a demonstration, staged carefully in the open compound where neighbors could see just enough to understand the message and not enough to intervene without inconvenience. "You think you are better than me," Halima had screamed, her breath hot with contempt as she shoved Zainab against the wall. "You think because you go out every morning, you are now a woman who can decide where my money goes." My money. The words still rang in Zainab's head, louder than the slap that followed them. The money had never belonged to Halima in the way she claimed. It was Zainab's lunch money, scraped together from long hours at the printing shop, from skipping meals, from walking when she could have taken transport. But ownership, in Halima's world, had nothing to do with effort. It came from power. And power came from having a house someone else needed. "You will not disgrace me," Halima had continued, her nails digging into Zainab's arm as she shook her. "Giving money to rubbish outside my gate. People will say I cannot control my house." Control. That was always the truth hiding behind the insults. Zainab shifted now, wincing as pain flared along her side. Her wrapper had slipped during the beating, exposing her in front of the neighbors before Halima shoved her upright again, not out of mercy but out of pride. Zainab remembered Mama Nkechi's face at the gate, tight with discomfort, eyes darting away as if shame were contagious. Baba Tunde had muttered something about women these days, his voice carrying the relief of someone grateful it was not his problem. No one had stopped Halima until the third slap, when the noise began to attract too much attention. Even then, it had been reluctant, half-hearted, as though everyone understood the rules. Domestic cruelty was acceptable, so long as it did not disrupt the street's rhythm. Zainab had been thrown aside like refuse, the words still ringing in her ears. "You are nothing without this house." Now, hours later, the truth of that sentence pressed down on her harder than Halima's hands ever had. Zainab was 26 years old, educated enough to know her situation was wrong, tired enough to know escape was not simple. Rent in Lagos did not care about principles. Landlords did not accept dignity as deposit. Every naira she saved was a small rebellion, and Halima had always sensed it, watching her with narrowed eyes, counting her movements, resenting every sign of independence like a personal betrayal. The $10 had been the final insult. Zainab dragged herself to the thin mattress in the corner of the room, the one Halima referred to as your space, as if charity could disguise neglect. She lay on her side, curling inward, her cheek pressed against the rough fabric. The room smelled faintly of dust and old cardboard, the scent of things stored away and forgotten. It matched how Halima treated her: useful, tolerated, but never valued. Her bag lay overturned where Halima had flung it, its contents scattered. Receipts, pens, the small notebook where Zainab tracked her expenses with careful precision, each figure representing restraint. She reached for it now, fingers trembling slightly, and flipped through the pages. The last entry stared back at her. Lunch crossed out. Zainab closed the notebook and laughed once, the sound sharp and humorless. $10 was not small money. Halima knew that. That was why she had beaten her so thoroughly, why she had screamed about waste and shame, why she had made sure everyone heard her accusations. It was not about generosity, it was about obedience. Halima could not stand the idea that Zainab had looked at a man outside the gate and decided, on her own, that he deserved something, especially when Halima herself had never looked at him at all. The old man's face rose unbidden in Zainab's mind, calm and unreadable. She remembered the way he sat every morning, not hunched, not begging, simply present. He never flinched when people passed, never exaggerated his need. He had dignity, the quiet kind that did not announce itself. When Zainab gave him the money, she did not feel generous. She felt aligned, as if she were correcting a small wrong the world had grown comfortable with. That was what Halima had sensed and hated. Not the money, but the defiance of it. The suggestion that Zainab could still choose kindness in a house built on cruelty. Zainab rolled onto her back and stared at the ceiling, at the familiar crack that split the plaster like a scar. She had counted those cracks during other beatings, other humiliations, other days when Halima reminded her exactly where she stood. Each time, Zainab had told herself it was temporary, that she would endure until she could leave quietly, without drama, without needing anyone. But something had changed this morning. Halima had crossed a line she could not uncross. The violence had not been hidden behind closed doors. It had been loud, public, intentional. It had announced to everyone, including Zainab herself, that this house was no longer merely hostile. It was dangerous. And worse, it had exposed how little protection adulthood actually offered a woman without property or backup. Outside, the compound settled into night. Somewhere beyond the gate, a familiar presence lingered. Zainab did not need to look to know he was there, sitting in the same spot, unbothered by the day's events. The thought made her chest tighten, not with fear, but with something sharper. Halima believed she had won. She believed the beating had corrected the problem, restored order, reasserted ownership. She was wrong. What she had done instead was strip away the last illusion Zainab had been clinging to. $10 was not small money. But humiliation cost more, and Zainab lay there, bruised and furious, beginning to understand that the price Halima would eventually pay had nothing to do with money at all. That understanding did not bring relief. It brought clarity, which was far more dangerous. The clarity followed her into sleep and dragged her back out of it before dawn, settling into her bones like a second skeleton. She woke to the sound of Halima's voice traveling through the walls, sharp and deliberate, already dressed in authority. Halima never lowered her voice in the mornings. Morning was when she reminded the house who owned the day before anyone else could claim it. "Useless girl," Halima said loudly, not addressing anyone in particular. "Useless and ungrateful. I feed her, I house her, and she uses my money to impress strangers." Zainab remained still on the mattress, her eyes open, her body stiff. Every muscle protested as if it remembered yesterday more vividly than her mind wanted to. She did not answer. Experience had taught her that silence irritated Halima more than argument, but irritation was still safer than escalation. Halima was not finished. "I warned her," she continued, clattering plates together in the kitchen with theatrical aggression. "I told her this house is not a charity, but some people only understand discipline. Discipline." The word landed like a joke, told without humor. Zainab listened as Halima poured water, banged a cup onto the counter, moved with the exaggerated confidence of someone who believed righteousness excused cruelty. Halima wanted witnesses, even imaginary ones. She wanted the walls to hear her version first, before Zainab could contaminate the narrative with truth. Zainab pushed herself upright slowly, swallowing back the nausea that rose when her ribs shifted. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, as if fabric could shield her from the hostility waiting outside her room. She did not check her face in the mirror this time. She already knew what she would see: bruises that would be explained away as clumsiness, swelling that would invite commentary, not concern. When she stepped into the main room, Halima turned just enough to see her, then turned away again, dismissive and deliberate. That was Halima's favorite kind of cruelty, the kind that erased you while still hurting you. "Good," Halima said, not looking at her. "You are awake. You will go to work early today. People like you need to stay busy before foolish ideas enter your head." Zainab nodded once. Her throat felt tight, but she forced herself to speak evenly. "Yes." Halima finally faced her then, eyes sharp, scanning her body with proprietary interest. The bruises were visible. Halima noticed them, registered them, and dismissed them all in the same second. "Cover yourself properly," she said. "You look like you want people to ask questions." That was the final insult of the morning. Not the beating, not the accusations. The expectation that Zainab should protect Halima's reputation with her silence and appearance, as if her pain were a mess she had made herself. Zainab adjusted her shawl without comment. The movement sent a fresh spike of pain through her side, but she did not flinch. Flinching encouraged commentary. She reached for her bag, careful to keep her movements measured, and headed toward the door. As she passed Halima, the older woman spoke again, her voice low now, intimate with threat. "If I ever catch you giving my money away again," Halima said, "you will not like what happens next." Zainab paused for half a second, long enough to let the words settle fully into her chest. Then she nodded again and stepped outside. The compound greeted her with indifference. Morning light revealed nothing unusual, no evidence of yesterday's violence, except the dull ache in her body and the careful way she held herself. Mama Nkechi was sweeping her side of the yard, her movements brisk, her eyes resolutely focused on the ground. Baba Tunde sat on his stool, sipping tea, pretending to read the newspaper. No one asked how she was. No one apologized. Zainab did not expect them to. She walked toward the gate, each step a negotiation with pain, her mind split between anger and calculation. She could not afford to lose her job. She could not afford to draw attention. Survival required performance, and she had become very good at it. The gate creaked as she opened it, the sound familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. Outside, the old man sat exactly where he always did, his posture unchanged, his presence calm in a way that felt almost offensive against the chaos of her morning. For a moment, Zainab hesitated. Yesterday's beating replayed itself in her mind. Halima's hands, the accusations, the public humiliation. The money was gone. There would be no offering today. She felt exposed without it, as if the absence itself were a confession. Still, she stepped forward. The old man looked up, his eyes settling on her face with unsettling focus. He noticed everything, the stiffness in her walk, the shadow beneath her cheekbone, the careful neutrality in her expression. "You are hurt," he said simply. The words were not a question, and that was what undid her. Zainab's breath caught despite herself. She looked away quickly, toward the road, toward anything that would not see her so clearly. "I am fine," she said, the lie automatic. He did not challenge her. He did not express pity. He nodded once, the same restrained gesture he always used, as if acknowledging the limits of what could be said aloud. "You came anyway," he said. Zainab swallowed. "I had to pass." "Yes," he agreed. "You did." There was something in his tone that unsettled her, something that suggested he was speaking about more than geography. She did not respond. She could feel time slipping, the weight of being late pressing against her ribs alongside the pain. As she turned to leave, his voice followed her. "Be careful," he said quietly. Zainab stopped again, her hand tightening on her bag strap. She wanted to ask him what he meant, wanted to unload the morning onto someone who might actually see it. Instead, she nodded once and walked away. Behind her, the gate closed with a soft finality. She did not see Halima watching from the window, her face tight with suspicion, her mind already rewriting the morning into something that justified her anger. Halima did not see the old man's eyes follow Zainab until she disappeared down the road, his expression unreadable, his stillness purposeful. What Halima believed was control was, in truth, exposure. And the house, bloated with its own cruelty, did not yet understand what it had allowed to begin. The old man did not move when the gate closed behind Zainab. He remained seated, hands resting loosely on his knees, eyes fixed on the empty road where she had disappeared. Around him, the city stretched awake in layers, engines coughing to life, vendors arranging their goods, the low hum of Lagos preparing to devour another day. It was a soundscape he knew intimately, not as background noise but as information. Every city spoke, if you listened long enough. He listened. 3 months was not mercy. It was calibration. He remembered the first week clearly, the way the street had reacted to his presence with predictable choreography, the avoidance disguised as busyness, the coins dropped without eye contact, the insults offered casually, as if cruelty were small talk. He had learned long ago that people revealed themselves most honestly when they believed they were unobserved or unimportant. Lagos made that easy. He had chosen this neighborhood deliberately, not because it was the poorest, but because it was ordinary. Ordinary cruelty interested him more than extreme desperation. Extreme situations excused too much. Ordinary ones revealed choice. From his place outside the gate, he had watched patterns form. Who slowed down? Who looked away? Who offered advice instead of help? Who used God's name as a shield against responsibility? He counted days, not money. He measured time in behavior. And then there was Zainab. She had not been the first to give, but she had been the first to look at him as if he were not a problem to be solved or a stain to be ignored. The first time she stopped, her hesitation had been brief, her decision settled. No performance, no explanation, just an exchange between two adults who understood scarcity differently. That was why he had noticed when the bruises appeared. He had seen violence before, in more forms than he cared to catalog. Violence wore many disguises, but humiliation was always its favorite accessory. When Zainab stepped out that morning, stiff and careful, her face held the quiet aftermath of something private that had been made public. The neighborhood had absorbed it without comment. That, too, was information. He exhaled slowly and rose to his feet, joints cracking softly beneath his weight. For 3 months, he had sat. Today, he walked. The movement drew attention immediately. Mama Nkechi paused mid-sweep, her eyes flicking up in surprise. Baba Tunde looked over the rim of his cup, curiosity briefly overpowering indifference. The old man acknowledged none of them. He adjusted the strap of the small bag slung across his shoulder and stepped away from the gate. Inside the house, Halima watched from behind the curtain, irritation prickling beneath her skin. She did not like deviation. She had already catalogued the morning's events as resolved, discipline applied, order restored. The old man's movement unsettled her, though she could not have said why. He had been harmless for months, background noise she barely registered, except as a symbol of embarrassment. She told herself he was leaving. She was wrong. Zainab's day dragged forward with mechanical cruelty. The printing shop was loud and unforgiving, its machines indifferent to human pain. She worked through the ache, smiling when required, deflecting questions with practiced ease. By afternoon, exhaustion pressed against her skull, a dull reminder that resilience had limits. Still, she stayed late, knowing that returning home too early invited scrutiny. When she finally walked back into the compound at dusk, the air felt charged, the way it did before storms. Voices murmured in clusters. Something had shifted. Halima stood near the gate, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her mouth compressed into a thin line of displeasure. In front of her stood the old man, no longer seated, no longer ignorable. Up close, he did not look fragile. His clothes were simple but clean, his posture erect, his presence commanding without theatrics. Zainab stopped short, her pulse quickening. Halima spoke first, her voice sharp with forced confidence. "What do you want?" The old man inclined his head politely. "Good evening. I asked you a question," Halima snapped. "You cannot just stand at my gate like you own the place." The irony hovered thick in the air, unnoticed by everyone except the man himself. "I am sorry if I have caused discomfort," he said evenly. That was not my intention, Halima scoffed. Then take yourself away. This is a respectable house. Respectable, the word tasted bitter. The old man's gaze shifted past Halima, settling briefly on Zainab. Not lingering, not possessive, just acknowledging. Then he returned his attention to Halima. I wanted to speak to you, he said. There is nothing to speak about, Halima replied, her irritation sharpening. I don't have money for beggars. A small pause followed. It was almost imperceptible, but Zainab felt it like a held breath. I am not here to ask for money, the man said. That was the first crack. Halima frowned, unsettled despite herself. Then why are you here? To thank you, he replied. The word landed wrong, tilting the moment off balance. Murmurs rippled through the small gathering of neighbors who had drawn closer, curiosity overpowering caution. For what? Halima demanded. For allowing me to sit here for 3 months without interference, he said calmly. Many people would not have. Halima bristled. You should be grateful I didn't call the authorities. Yes, he agreed. That too. Something in his composure irritated her deeply. She was used to deference or hostility, not measured politeness. Say what you came to say and go, she snapped. The old man nodded once. I will. He reached into his bag and withdrew a slim folder, holding it loosely at his side. He did not open it. He did not wave it. He simply held it, as if the weight alone were enough. For 3 months, he continued, his voice carrying easily, I have observed this street. The way people treat what they believe has no power. Zainab's stomach tightened. Today, he said, I have seen enough. Halima laughed harshly. Observed? Who are you to observe us? The old man met her gaze fully now, his eyes steady, assessing, utterly unimpressed. That, he said, is a fair question. The silence that followed felt intentional, stretched thin with anticipation. Zainab sensed it then, the shape of something large approaching. Not relief, but consequence. Her earlier anger cooled into something colder and more precise. This was not rescue. This was exposure. And whatever was about to be revealed would not end cleanly. That, the old man said again, his voice steady in the gathering quiet, is a fair question. Halima straightened her wrapper and laughed, but the sound came out too sharp, too fast. Laughter was her reflex when control slipped, a way of reclaiming ground through noise. You sit on the floor outside my gate for months, and now you want to ask questions? Are you mad? A few neighbors chuckled uncertainly, eager to align themselves with the loudest voice in the moment. Public cruelty always looked safer when shared. The old man did not react. He did not raise his voice. He did not explain himself yet. Instead, he took a single step forward, just enough to alter the geometry of the space. It was subtle, but Zainab felt it immediately, the way one felt a change in weather before rain. My name is Alhaji Musa Bello, he said, and I do not ask questions lightly. The name moved through the crowd like a disturbance, not recognition yet, but curiosity sharpening into attention. Lagos was a city that understood titles, even when it did not know faces. Halima scoffed again, though her arms tightened across her chest. You expect me to know you? No, he replied calmly. I expect you to listen. That was when Halima's temper flared fully. Listen to what? That you want money? Or sympathy? I don't have time for nonsense. This is my house. Yes, Alhaji Musa said. It is. The certainty in his agreement threw her off balance. She had expected resistance, not validation. Then leave, she snapped. Before I call someone to remove you. He nodded once. You may call whoever you like. Zainab felt the tension ripple outward. Mama Nkechi shifted uncomfortably. Baba Tunde cleared his throat. This was no longer entertainment. This was risk. Alhaji Musa opened the slim folder at last and removed a single document. He held it up just high enough for Halima to see, not the crowd. Not yet. You see this address? He asked. Halima squinted despite herself. Her mouth opened, then closed. The color drained slowly from her face. Not all at once, but in stages, as recognition fought denial. "That is impossible," she said finally. Al-Haji Musa tilted his head. "Is it?" Zainab's heart pounded. She could not see the paper, but she could see Halima's hands begin to shake. The neighbors noticed too. Murmurs spread, no longer curious but alert. Something was happening that did not involve them, and that made them nervous. "This compound," Al-Haji Musa continued evenly, "was purchased 12 years ago under a holding company. The name on the documents is not yours." Halima laughed again, but this time it cracked halfway through. "You think you can come here and lie? I have lived here for years." "Yes," he said, "as a caretaker." The word landed like a slap. Halima's eyes darted around, searching for support, for interruption, for someone to stop this before it went further. No one did. Public cruelty had taught them to stay still. "You don't know what you are saying," she insisted, her voice rising. "My husband was employed to oversee the property," Al-Haji Musa finished. "After his death, the arrangement continued informally. Out of convenience." Zainab felt a cold clarity settle over her. This was not revenge. It was accounting. Halima shook her head violently. "You are lying. If this were true, why would you sit outside like a beggar?" Al-Haji Musa looked at her then, really looked at her, and something like disappointment flickered across his features. "Because power is loud," he said, "and character is quiet." The crowd fell completely silent. "For 3 months," he went on, his voice carrying without effort, "I sat here and watched how this street treated someone they believed had nothing. I watched who felt entitled to dignity and who did not. I watched cruelty become routine." His gaze moved briefly, intentionally, across the neighbors. Mama Nkechi looked away. Babatunde stared at the ground. "And I watched you," he said, returning his attention to Halima. Halima's bravado collapsed into fury. "You think sitting outside makes you God? You think you can judge me?" "I am not judging you," he replied. "I am correcting a mistake." Zainab's breath caught. Correction. Not punishment. Not mercy. Al-Haji Musa turned slightly, angling his body so the neighbors could see the document now. "This property will be reclaimed." The words hit like a dropped plate, sharp and irrevocable. Halima screamed. There was no other word for it. The sound tore out of her, raw and panicked. "You can't do this. You can't throw me out like a dog." "You threw dignity out first," he said quietly. She lunged forward then, reaching for the paper, for him, for anything she could grab onto. 2 men stepped in instinctively, holding her back not out of justice, but out of fear. Chaos rippled outward, voices overlapping, questions firing without answers. Zainab stood frozen, her body buzzing with adrenaline. She did not feel triumphant. She felt exposed. This revelation did not erase the beatings, did not unmake the years of control. It only reframed them. Halima's cruelty had been rented. Al-Haji Musa raised a hand slightly, and the noise died down again, astonishingly fast. "This is not happening today," he said. "No one will be dragged into the street." Halima sobbed now, the sound ugly and unrestrained. "Please," she said, the word foreign on her tongue. Al-Haji Musa did not look at her. Instead, he turned to Zainab. "For 3 months," he said, "you were the only person here who treated me like a human being." Zainab felt heat rush to her face, a mix of shame and anger. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "That is why it mattered," he replied. Halima whirled toward her, hatred blazing. "You did this," she screamed. "You brought this curse into my house." The accusation struck deep, old and familiar. Zainab flinched despite herself. Al-Haji Musa's voice hardened for the first time. "No," he said. "You did." He closed the folder and handed it to one of the men beside him. "Formal notices will follow. You have time to arrange your affairs." Then he turned and walked away, leaving devastation behind him like an unpaid debt. Zainab stood amid the wreckage, her heart racing, her future suddenly uncertain in ways that terrified her more than Halima ever had. Power had spoken plainly. and it had not asked her what she wanted. The compound did not erupt the way Zainab expected after Al-Haji Musa left. There was no shouting, no collective outrage, no righteous anger on her behalf. Instead, something colder settled in its place. Conversations resumed in whispers. Doors closed earlier than usual. Faces that had once ignored her now avoided her deliberately, as if proximity itself carried risk. Power had shifted, and everyone was recalculating. Halima stood near the doorway like a ruin no one wanted to step too close to. Her wrapper was loose, her headscarf crooked, her face slick with sweat and fury. The screaming had stopped, replaced by something worse. She stared at Zainab with a focus sharpened by loss. "You think you have won," Halima said hoarsely, her voice carrying just far enough for others to hear. "You think this man will carry you on his head now?" Zainab said nothing. She had learned that denying accusations only fed them. Halima laughed, a broken sound. "You will see," she continued. "People like you always see." The neighbors shifted uncomfortably. No one intervened. No one contradicted her. Halima had lost authority, but she had not lost her mouth, and mouths still wounded. "You were nothing when you came here," Halima went on, her words thick with venom. "Nothing. I took you in. I fed you. I trained you. And this is how you repay me. Trained." The word almost made Zainab laugh. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the old reflex to doubt herself, to reframe cruelty as sacrifice. That reflex faltered now, not because she was healed, but because it was tired. She stepped back slowly, creating distance without spectacle. She did not trust Halima's hands anymore. Someone cleared their throat nearby. Mama Nkechi avoided Zainab's eyes entirely. Baba Tunde busied himself with folding his newspaper, as if the shape of it suddenly mattered. Sympathy was expensive. Silence was cheaper. Zainab retreated into the house and gathered what little she owned. Clothes, documents, the notebook. She moved carefully, aware of Halima's gaze, burning into her back. "You are not leaving with anything from this house," Halima spat from the doorway. Zainab paused, then turned. Her voice, when it came, surprised them both with its steadiness. "I came here with nothing. I will leave the same way." Halima flinched, the words landing harder than a slap. For a moment, Zainab saw fear flicker behind the hatred. Then it hardened. "Go," Halima said. "Go and beg outside like your friend." The insult no longer landed the way Halima intended. Zainab adjusted her bag and stepped outside again, into a compound that no longer belonged to anyone she recognized. Al-Haji Musa waited by the gate, alone. Up close, the distance between them felt larger, not smaller. Power did that. It rearranged space. "I did not plan to speak to you today," he said quietly. Zainab nodded. "I know. I had hoped to leave without being seen," he continued. That was optimistic. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and the anger she had kept carefully contained finally surfaced. "You watched," she said, "for 3 months. Yes. You saw what she did to me. Yes." The admission sat between them, heavy and unmoving. "And you waited?" Zainab said. He did not deny it. "Timing matters." "So does pain," she replied. For the first time, something in his expression shifted. Not guilt, recognition. "I am not asking you to be grateful," he said. "That's good," Zainab said, her voice tight. "Because I'm not." Silence stretched. The city hummed beyond the walls, indifferent and endless. "I can help you," Al-Haji Musa said at last. "There are options. Housing, work, protection." Protection. The word tasted strange. Zainab imagined exchanging one roof of control for another, one benefactor for another, one set of unspoken expectations for a different, quieter kind. "And the price?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. "I don't want to be someone's experiment," Zainab said softly. "I don't want to be proof of anything." "You already are," he replied. The honesty stung more than comfort would have. She looked back at the house, at Halima's silhouette moving inside. Frantic now, stripped of certainty but not cruelty. That chapter was over. Whatever else awaited her, it would not be there. I need time, Zainab said. Al-Haji Musa inclined his head. Time is the one thing I can afford to give. She nodded, surprised by the lump in her throat. She had expected ultimatum, not space. As she stepped away from him, she felt the weight of eyes on her back. The neighbors, Halima, the street, the city. Kindness had made her visible, and visibility was dangerous. She stopped at the gate. This was where it had started. This thin line between inside and outside, between safety and exposure, between being ignored and being seen. The gate stood open behind her, the house dark and hostile. Ahead lay the road, noisy and uncertain. Zainab rested her hand on the metal and closed her eyes. There was no version of this choice that did not cost her something. When she opened them again, she stepped forward. The gate creaked softly behind her, but whether it closed or stayed open, no one could say. If you were Zainab, what would you do next? Accept help or walk away with nothing? And do you believe Al-Haji Musa was right to test people? Or was that cruelty disguised as wisdom? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Disagree? Argue? Also, let us know where you are watching from, and comment part 2 if you want us to drop it.